in the pending global reset. Left brain jobs will be wiped out by Google, robots, and outsourcing. The antidote is the unoutsourceable superpower of the flow state. Welcome to What the Flow, where we discuss making money easier, connecting deeper, and creating your own luck. And WTF, why we numb out, sabotage, and play small, and how to change it. It's Flow Time with Tony.
WTF, welcome to What the Flow. This is Tony Litster. Super excited to have you here on today's podcast. The episode we're going to be talking about today is about sitting in a dark room by yourself and trying to solve your problems that way. I just spent the last 2 days on strategy sessions. If you're not joining me on YouTube, you're going to hear a little bit of noise because I'm walking through the woods because the snow is finally melting where I live. But I spent the last 2 days on strategy calls with people who are part of my legendary mastermind group. And so I spent a lot of hours talking to people and digging into what's going on in their inner world. And it's a big variety of people. It's people that some of them, there was a really successful artist for a lot of years that I talked to today. There's a guy that kind of has a regular job that I had a conversation with. There was a woman who recently moved from another country to marry a guy and then figured out within a few days of arriving that it was a mistake and was trying to figure out how to unravel it. Like some really interesting conversations with people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life. One guy, this is right during the coronavirus. I don't know when I'm going to drop this podcast episode in, but we're in the quarantine of the coronavirus currently around the world, and people are freaking out. People are trying to figure out what to do with their businesses. And I had a conversation with one person who they have some generational money in their family and they're just enjoying the break. Another guy has a business that his grandfather started, his dad ran, now he's running. Had 600 employees he laid off last week. So I have this variety of experiences that I've had in the last little bit of talking to people. And inevitably, across the board, each of them has had some level of an inner dialogue, some dissonance with themselves, and we did a bunch of I do neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis work, so we did some deep dive hypnosis stuff to go back and do what I call the rescue mission, right? To ultimately the exercise, and I'll probably post one of these as a podcast because I've recorded one recently that I did. But the idea is that, like one guy was a dentist, does very well in his life financially, physically very fit, lots of different great things going on in his life. But there was an element of, in the past, in his, when he was a kid, he picked up a story that said, I'm not good enough. And pretty much every one of these people that I did a deep dive with came up with this moment of I'm not good enough. Now, I did this recently for myself. So I try to really be careful about revealing identities of my clients. I might tell some really basic details of, sometimes I even lie to you on the podcast and I say that they're something other than what they were so that I can tell the story without telling who the person was. So full disclosure about my lies that I tell you to protect the innocent. But I did this deep dive for myself recently where there was this awareness in me that at some point in my past, I didn't have a story about myself that I wasn't good enough. All right, so if I go back far enough in my past, that there was a moment when I was just a living, breathing animal here on planet Earth, and I felt good in my body, and I felt good about me, and I didn't give a crap what my hair looked like, or what color my hair was, or what clothes I wore, or any of that stuff, what my success was or wasn't. And so I did this work with this coach where we basically went back on a timeline. So you can imagine a timeline of your life. And we went backwards and we made all of the steps on the timeline be individual snapshots. So if you've ever seen like the Thomas Edison, the original sort of movie maker that he made, where there was like these drawings, or there were pictures of an animal running, like there's pictures of this cheetah running, and it was like picture, 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 and then if he flipped through them, scroll through the cards, it would be a motion picture, right? It would move, the animal would move. So we did this visualization work where I got to look at the timeline of my life, and it was individual snapshots, pictures. And I could go back and go back and back and kind of like dissect it and slice it and slice it and slice it. Like they do in these scientific experiments where they'll take the thing and they'll slice it up till they can identify the one moment when it passed, from one place to another. And for me, what I was looking for was the moment of when I was okay, and my story said I was okay, and my nervous system said I was okay, and then the moment when I made up a story. And I went in and I did this rescue mission. When I did it myself with my coach, I didn't call it a rescue mission, but I've done this with several people lately. I did this with a big group of people on our mastermind group where I don't know, 850 people that are a part of it. But we did this deep dive work. Wow, I'm now walking in a pond now that the snow's melting, so I may not get very far into the woods here. But we did this deep dive. And so when I did this myself, I went back and I was a kid, maybe 4 years old, but I was younger than 5 because I lived in this house and then we moved when I was 5. And I'd gone over to the neighbor's house and we were playing doctor, right? Took our clothes off, we examined each other. It was so much fun. It was great. It was a good time. I still like playing doctor a lot. But I went and I had this experience as a kid and it was beautiful. It was great. And I came home, I was walking across the street and I was on cloud 9. And I came home and my mom was there and she said, "What did you do?" And I told her because I didn't know that I shouldn't tell her. I didn't know that I needed to have any shame about it, or that there was anything weird about it. It wasn't just like a thing that, normal human beings do at some point in their life. I did it a little early maybe. And if I knew my kid was across the street at 4 years old playing doctor, I would intervene as well, right? So just in terms of in the fairness of how my mother responded, it's totally legit that she got really concerned, right? I would too. I got 5 kids. If my kid was at the neighbor's house playing doctor, I'd be like, no, cut that one off. And from the experiential side, it was a lot of fun, which is often the case about my parenting. A lot of things that I experience that I think are a lot of fun, I cut my kids off from doing, but that's what we do as parents. But the point of this is I was able to go back, and there was this distinct moment in my consciousness and my awareness of being okay. And then this moment of this story I made up, which was, oh no, I need to be something other than what I am to get mom's approval. And it wasn't like my mom even flipped out. She just asked questions. She was concerned, but I could pick up on that something was wrong. And all of a sudden it was like, uh-oh, maybe who I'm being, maybe what I did, maybe I'm bad. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not lovable. So we did this work where we looked at snapshot, and I got to go in at the moment just before I bought into a story, before I bought into the lie that said I'm not enough, or I'm bad, or I'm wrong, or I'm dark, or I'm whatever it was. As a little kid, it was just like, oh no, it was more like an emotion of like, uh-oh, I need to be something other than I am for mommy to love me. And I could go in and I could have this conversation with that kid right before that belief was taken on. And I could go in there and intervene, and I could go, hey man, you haven't done anything wrong. You're just okay. You're perfect. You're beautiful. You're lovable. And there's going to be this situation where you were about to take on a belief that would cause you a lot of pain in life and a lot of isolation. It would prevent you from having joy and from enjoying the process of life and from receiving love. And I could sit him down and I could go, the truth about you is that, here, I love you for who you are, not what you do. You're perfect. And like take that in and then step into that next moment of the timeline with this child through this neurolinguistic programming work, and step into the timeline in that next moment with this truth. So mom could do what she did, which was totally justifiable and normal. And I would actually be concerned if she didn't. She could do her thing and I could make up a new story in that moment. And that new story then could move forward in my life. So there's this emotional shift. So I've been doing this work with people, like session after session after session, as part of the mastermind group, but that this is some of the work that I do. And it was really interesting because a couple of people brought up, like one woman said, I was an unwanted child. And so she didn't have this in her consciousness. Another woman that I worked with was severely abused as a child, and like 18 months, like beaten by her mother, like terrible. And she had no awareness. There was no memory bank. There was no moment of when she didn't have this chaos in her nervous system as a child who wasn't taken care of. And so like with one woman we went clear back to her when she was born, when she was in her mother. And then she was like, wow, yeah, my mom really didn't like being pregnant. So we went further back to the moment before she became an embodied being. And before the moment of her conception, right? Before there was a physical body at that point. It was pure consciousness. It was this life desiring for life to happen. And we could go back to that place and tap into, in that place of pure consciousness, this sensation in her body that she could carry forward through all these other stories. Now, there's an interesting discussion on this of going, is this real? Are we actually making change? Is anything actually happening? Because the one lady who said, I have this story, my mom didn't want me, my siblings didn't want me, my partner didn't want me, my kids haven't wanted me. She had like this really difficult 50 years of evidence that she wasn't wanted. And so she was like, is this going to work? Does this work for me? Am I just making up some story? Am I just trying to do some like feel good bull crap, thing of like shifting my emotions and thinking about bubbly thoughts and all this other stuff? This is my answer, and it's a bit brutal, particularly when we struggle with finding a place in us that feels like it's okay. At the end of the day, you and I make up a story about ourselves. Whether that story is true doesn't matter, because it becomes true for us. So if someone doesn't have this in their nervous system, if they've never had this experience of they have all this evidence of pain and rejection of people saying that they're not wanted, that person still has to sit in a place of a story, a conclusion of not being wanted, not being worthy, not being lovable. And so whether this work actually changes something, or whether this is just something, there's some shift in the mind, and the body is a trick, a hypnosis trick, or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. Because if you can go back and rewrite that story, you can experience now completely differently. We can't change what happened. We can't change all the rejection. We can't change the pain. We can't change the choices. We can change how we feel now in this moment. And by changing how we feel now, we step into the future from a new consciousness and a new awareness. And so this woman that didn't have anything in her nervous system from the time of her conception, she was able to find something in the pure consciousness of like before, like the energy of life wanting to come forth into life, that she has unique gifts and unique value, and that she is a valuable, one-of-a-kind individual. And that empowered her to then come to the present moment and have a new relationship to herself. And the whole point of personal development, the whole point of transformation in this work, I think, is one thing. And I learned this from a coach that really like had me really like take this in. It's the purpose of transformation is so that we occur to ourselves differently. If you can have a moment where you suddenly occur to yourself differently, where suddenly you and how you relate to you and your value and your success and your failures and your shame and your joy and your life and what this whole thing's about, particularly at times right now where there's so much disruption in the world and people are going to lose jobs and lose lives, and they're going to lose loved ones, and they're going to lose businesses, they're going to lose stuff, houses, and like our status, our sense of survival, it all gets triggered. We might lose relationships, right? Particularly during times of chaos and transition. If you and I can occur to ourselves differently, if we can occur simply as a living, breathing animal on this planet and we observe what's happening rather than riding the roller coaster of what's happening. If we occur to ourselves that we have value independent of what happens outside of us, that we're a valuable human being, whether we lose our money or our stuff or our job or people, or we get rejected or we get sick or any of that stuff, when we occur to ourselves differently, then the next choice we make comes from the new occurrence, and we make a slightly different choice. And then the next choice we make is slightly different and slightly different and slightly different, and our life completely transforms and changes. And there's all kinds of possibility and opportunity that happens because we occur to ourselves differently. So for someone who has trauma, it's just like my heart goes out to you if you don't have a place in your nervous system when you can remember being enough. And maybe you're going to have to manufacture that. Maybe you're going to have to use your vivid imagination to come up with something to say that you have value. You're a one-of-a-kind living, breathing creation, and you get to choose that because you're choosing it, and that's it. Now, this leads me to the point of today's podcast. Sitting in a room by ourselves, trying to use our thinker brain to change this complicated emotional stuff that makes us who we are, is a recipe for staying the same. Let me say that again. Sitting in a room by yourself, in the dark, or maybe not in the dark, but sitting there, you trying to use your thinker brain to think your way out of this deeply embodied emotional stuff, this trauma, these things that happened to us as a kid, these recurring experiences, these pain points, these losses, these difficult things we've gone through. You sitting in a room trying to use your thinker brain to think your way out of this alone is the most likely formula for you to not change. And that's what I drilled in on these phone calls today that I had with these people. I'm like, look, you just had, because a lot of them had a really positive breakthrough, really beautiful shift in their awareness with themselves. And then they think in that moment, this is what happens when we have a transformative moment. We feel love, we feel connection, we feel something beautiful. We think that that feeling is going to last. And it's convincing, this new sense of self, this identity, this who we are, this like shift, this transformation, this breakthrough, occurring to ourselves differently. We think it's going to last. And that's the beautiful illusion that the brain does to keep us the same. The brain doesn't want us to change. Change is dangerous to the brain. And so what happens is we feel good and we go, whoa, I can breathe. Everybody will say we check in their body where it used to be tension and trauma and pain. And they go, whoa, I have space. I feel lighter. I feel better. Wow, I feel this clarity. Thank you. That was amazing. They had a breakthrough. They got the emotional high, which is the most dangerous part of transformation. Because we think that's real. We think that's the new reality. And that has a shelf life of about 4 days. And if we don't implement tools and strategies and accountabilities outside of us, outside of how we're feeling, then it is absolutely the most likely thing that we will simply just go back to how we were and how we felt about ourselves. And it's worse than when we started because we have an awareness in our nervous system of how it actually feels to love ourselves. And that awareness gnaws at us and bugs at us, and it like shames the crap out of us in telling us that we're not good enough because, if we were actually good enough, that breakthrough would have lasted. So what do you have to do in order for this change to become permanent? This is what the brain science says, right? When we think a thought, it's firing electrical impulses in the brain through the neurons of our brain. We fire a sequence of neurons in our brain. It releases chemicals into our body. That's an emotion. That's a sensation. We feel it. We embody the belief. It goes from a thought to an embodied belief. So then we go through life and we go into difficult situations. We do something that's going to scare us. We take a risk. We become vulnerable. The body reacts because of the past trauma and protects us from getting hurt again. And we feel that and it stops us from moving forward and we back up and we keep being the same. That's what's happening. So if we want to change, we got to play the same game. We've got to get the neurons to fire in a certain sequence to cause the new feeling to occur in our body. The brain science says if we'll feel this every day for about 30 days, it'll develop a new neural pathway. And if we keep reinforcing it over 90 days, it will become a primary neural pathway, or on a cellular level, it becomes who we are. But in order to do that, We have to get ourselves to feel. And to get ourselves to feel, we have to do some kind of embodied exercise. And if we're sitting alone in a room by ourselves, trying to think our way out of this, we're usually at like a level 2 or 3. We're like a low level. We're not at a peak state. We're not feeling this energy in our body. We're not doing this embodied response. And so the way I've designed my courses and my programs are to give the best support to how the brain actually works. And so whether you go into one of my courses or not is irrelevant, but think about this in your life. If you want to, you can, and that's great, and I welcome you. And if you want to implement this in your life, make sure you apply these principles. First, you have to do something that activates the body, right? So we do the breathing exercise. If you've downloaded my free mini course, I take you through the steps of my morning ritual. And the purpose of the morning ritual is to get into a peak elevated state. So we change our emotions. We change how we're feeling. Can you tell I'm a bit fired up about this? I finished this last phone call. I've been on the phone so much, but I was like, I got to talk about this. I want you to have transformation. That's why I do this stuff. I don't just get up to tell stories. I want you to experience transformation. I've experienced radical transformation in my life, and I'm so deeply grateful for the mentors and the teachers and the coaches and the people and the people that showed up that I thought were the evil people that were sometimes the universe's gift in my life to help me see me. I'm so grateful for that. And that's why I create this stuff. So I want you to have transformation. So you got to think about how your brain's already working, and you've got to put tools in place to work with that. So if you think you're going to change, you are defying billions of years of evolution. This brain that keeps us alive has figured out how to stay alive by only changing incrementally. So if you want to have some radical transformation about who you were raised to be and who you want to be in this life, then you have to follow the rules, because the brain's going to try and go against you. And it's going to go against you through emotion. The same way it keeps you from taking risks or from doing things that are vulnerable or scary. It's going to stop you through emotion. So what you have to do is you have to have structure outside of you, right? So one of the structures I have, we have a mastermind program. And this is a group setting where we join as a group, right, digitally, on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week. But what that means is it's outside of you. It's not you sitting in a dark room by yourself trying to think your way out of these issues. So we gather as a group. So we have social structure and social accountability. So one component is you have to have some structure that's not you and not how you feel. So you have to have some kind of like meeting or activity or some kind of accountability that you're going to show up at a certain place at a certain time. And you're going to show up independent of how you feel, because your commitment is stronger than your emotion. And this is where radical accountability comes in. Radical commitment to what we want, to what we're intending to create. I don't know if I've done this on any of the other videos, but in this we have this group of these 850 people. And in the very first training I did, I showed a picture of me. It's disgusting, I know. It's a picture of me taking a drink in this little plastic cup. I was in a restaurant bathroom, and I was taking a drink of my own pee. Yeah, I know, it's disgusting, but it was what I call it. It's a power pledge, or sometimes I call it a piss pledge. And it was this commitment that I made that said, if I break my word around this, like I really mean it, I really mean I'm going to do this thing that I say I'm going to do. And if I don't, in the time frame I say I'm going to do it, I'll drink my own pee. And I broke my word. And I was like, immediately when I realized I broke my word, I just got up from the meal. I went in the bathroom. I took a picture of myself in the mirror having this drink, and I texted to the person. I said, I broke my word, and I'm now getting back in my word. But I did that because I wanted radical accountability. I wanted something that I was so resistant to, something that made me like gag, literally, that I was like, oh, no way. I don't want to do that. I'm absolutely going to be my word on this thing. You have to have something outside of you. Some kind of radical accountability that isn't based on how you're feeling in the moment, that keeps you doing the step that causes the neurons to fire, that causes you to feel the new feeling until it becomes who you are. So structure, accountability, with someone you're actually accountable to, a radical power pledge of your accountability, and then you need to have some tools. And the tools are designed to get you back into the peak state regardless of how you feel. Now, my opinion on this is it's got to be easy, and it's got to be something I can do on my worst day, because I have a lot of days where I don't feel well. I have a lot of days where I don't feel like doing this. I had a guy message me on Facebook today. He goes, wow, man, How is it that you're always so incredibly positive all the time? And I had just shot this video where I was I was like walking barefoot across snow, and I got into this pond down the road here. And I'm sitting in the pond. I shoot this video. It's like a 3.5 or 4 minute video where I'm in this pond of really freaking cold water. And I'm talking about sensations and how we allow sensations to govern us. And that leaning into uncomfortable sensations is really important if we want to have transformation in our life. And he's like, how are you so positive all the time? I'm like, look, dude, social media is fake news, bro. I'm positive when I shoot that video because I've done my peak stuff. I'm in a peak state and I'm doing my ice water and I feel amazing after I get out of that cold water. All the endorphins in my system are firing. All the blood's rushing to the surface of my skin. It's this incredible like fight or flight experience where I feel so alive. And I shoot a video then. I'm like, I don't shoot videos when I'm feeling shitty. I don't shoot videos right after I have a fight with my partner. I don't shoot videos. I had an argument with my son today. My teenage son was saying that I shouldn't require him to get up at a certain amount of time because he's a YouTuber and he needs to play his video game as part of his YouTube experiment. And sometimes he has to stay up really late playing his video game because that's one of the things he's creating in his life. He says, don't you support my creation? I'm like, you need to get up at a certain time and you need to do your schoolwork first. He's like, well, why are you knocking my creations? We had this big fight and I thought it was ridiculous and he thought I was ridiculous. I don't post my stuff about that. So there's going to be times when we're having a rough day. And so this stuff has to be easy. It has to be something we can do on our worst day. So what I like to do are put tools in place that will reinforce this belief, this emotion, this sensation you're having in this embodied response in your body. And so like, for example, one of the things I do is I record my voice speaking statements to myself or asking questions to myself. I mix it with Mozart music, and then I lay in bed and I listen to this. What happens is it'll like ask me these questions of like, one of the questions I have is, how can I love myself more fully in this moment? And so I'll hear my voice speak that and I'll lay there and I'll listen to Mozart music and I'll answer it. How can I love myself more fully in this moment? How can I create more value? And actually what I have is, how do I create more ridiculous value so that I experience greater abundance in my life today? And then I answer that question, right? So that's a tool that's outside of me. It's outside of my thinker brain. I recorded it when I was in a peak state. It brings me back to that peak state. It's not based on how I'm feeling in the moment. It's something outside of me. And what happens is when you build this up, right? Think about this. You have accountability. You have a power pledge. You have community. You have a really clear objective of what you're going to do. You have these tools on the outside of you. And you have your rituals. And then you start to do those things. And then you're going to implode and crash because that's part of it. That just says your brain's on track. But instead of letting that be the end of it, you just get up the next day and you go through the same steps. Why? Because you have this stuff outside of you that's supporting you. And there's this illusion that we can sit in a dark room by ourselves and think our way out of these problems. And we just stay the same. Thank you. I needed to get that off my chest. So this is my really like my invitation for you. Figure out what tools support you the best. Figure out what accountability supports you the best. Sorry, it's getting taken out by a pine tree. What accountability supports you the best? Figure out a power pledge for you. Now, some people will say, okay, I'm gonna write a check for $1,000 to this group. And if I don't do what I said I'm going to do in the time frame I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to send that check. Right? There can be a pain point associated with it. Sometimes people like to do something where it's a reward. If I do this thing on this time, I'm going to get a massage. Or if I do this thing at this time, I'm going to go have a meal at this place. Like something that feels good, something that's a reward experience. Whatever that is for you, don't buy into the illusion that this transformation is going to happen when you sit there alone and use your thinker brain to do it. Really put the tools in place so that you get to experience the fruits of this. So that you get to experience this aliveness in you, this healing in you, this being able to show up in confidence in a new way, and that you occur to yourself differently. So you get into that same situation and you respond just a little bit differently this next time because you occur to you as more valuable and more capable that you occur to you with a greater level of contribution and impact, a greater level of purpose, that you occur to you in your physical body, that you are someone with a strong, vibrant, energetic physical body, that you occur to you in intimacy as being centered in you, able to be with yourself and therefore able to be with another human being and have this deep, rich connection that's available. That's what's possible when you build the right structure around this transformation. So thank you for playing with me today. I look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. In the meantime, create yourself a fantastic day.
If you're ready now to access the superpower of the flow state in your life, download the free mini course to learn the 3 easy steps of Tony's morning ritual. Now go and create some luck.